Have you ever wondered why the world is the way the world is? I mean, just why is the world the way the world is? Is the world the way the world is because that's just the way the world is? Or is the way the world is because the world has been made that way by people? And now, I know that sounds very confusing, doesn't it? But what I'm saying is, have we got to where we are, where things are just very uncomfortable, things are very bad, things seem a bit disturbing. We have wars going on, we have these things being brought down to us from the government, the 15-minute cities, the digital IDs, you know, all of this stuff. We've gone through a pandemic in which we've been given a medical intervention, which now turns out not to have been a very sensible thing, and yet it was pushed like nobody's business upon us, and all this sort of stuff. I mean, is the world where it is because that just happens? Or is there more of a malevolent force behind that? You see, I've been thinking about this. To me, it feels strange that we are where we are in this day and age. I mean, if you think back at the progression of man, and it's very hard to think about the progression of man because there's sort of dark periods in our life. For example, we have the pyramids, don't we? And this sort of notion of ancient civilizations that could do amazing things that we're still trying to work out how the Great Pyramid and many of these other amazing pyramids from 10,000 years ago were actually built. I mean, some people say, oh, well, it was obviously slaves, but how did they get them so absolutely accurately? And then other people say, no, it wasn't slaves. They must have had some other technology. And other people are saying, no, they used levitation or other skills. And then other people are saying, well, actually, it was space people who came down and did all this. And you know, who knows? Who knows exactly why? But some of the mathematics for the way that the position of these pyramids that are there suggests a super intelligent being or brain behind it. And then we see that man's development has changed a lot over the time, and we go to the Anglo-Saxons, if you like, or the Normans coming in, and it's sort of a different mindset altogether. Okay, we had castles and they've been very well built, but not in the same way as the pyramids. And so then we still have battles and people, you know, trying to vie, however you want to pronounce it, for land and usage and power and all of that. And we get to the Magna Carta becoming signed, and where the people have decided, or the barons have said, actually, look, we can't have kings just having carte blanche, do whatever you damn well like. I think there should be some sort of rules based on a common principle. And we had, of course, the common law, in which to do no harm, which had been there for, well, it's a moralistic law, isn't it? Do no harm. It just basically means don't hurt anybody. And then we've got the use of statutes and rules and things that Parliament have come in order to try and just make people behave a little bit better. And then I always wonder, there's always that business about, well, if we're all equal in the law, who's above the law? I mean, is the king above the law? I don't know. Can he just go around and murder people left, right and centre if he wants to and have nothing come back to him? Or what about the Prime Minister? Is he above the law? Should he be able to do murder and kill people, or have parties at certain times when everybody else is not allowed to have parties? You know what I'm saying. Is there anybody who's above the law? And generally, I think we all agree that nobody's above the law. And so therefore, if nobody's above the law, we're all equal in the law. So how is it that some people can make laws that penalise us unless we actually consent to it? And that's what I believe voting is about, being part of the voting system and being part of the government. But we'll come back to that in a minute, because it seems to me in the last, 150 years, it's almost as if there's been a secret covenant, if you like, or a secret agreement between certain factions of society, maybe families, maybe in these, you often hear these rumours of people with a bloodline that they shush, keep it very secret, you know, like the Masons and things like that, you know, all secret societies and things. Now, I'm not saying there is, but it feels like over the last 100 years that instead of making the world better, there seems to be influences actually that makes the world worse for us. I mean, we're more sophisticated, yes. We're more cultivated, well, in theory, yes. And we're civilized, of course. And yet, in this modern society, things seem to be going wrong. I mean, we've had more wars, haven't we? We've had the First World War and the Second World War, and let's face it, if you were a wise banker, you could, I don't know, bankroll both sides and you'd still be making money, would you not? We've had things happening which just seem a bit unusual in a civilized and cultivated and sophisticated world. For example, why is it that the people who seem to get very rich, or the corporations that seem to have more of the customers and more money and are everywhere, are the ones that actually seem to be doing things in a more detrimental way for society? Why is it that certain rich people can fund, for example, think tanks that then decide to come up with plans which actually are going to penalise people much more and infiltrate through the government? And it's almost as if the government, the people in the government, are actually not really in control at all, as if they're just puppets. And maybe there is things against those people. You know, they've been blackmailed, for example, in some extreme circumstances so that they have to go along with whatever the masters say. I mean, I don't know whether this is true or not, but it certainly feels as if the people in charge, the people with power, the people with a lot of money are not being very beneficial to the people underneath. And yet, if we're all equal in the law, what gives anybody the right to make it unlawful for us to go about our business and be happy and fun and all the rest of it? And you take the recent pandemic, for example, in which there was a virus. Now, you might say that the virus was potentially leaked on purpose or not on purpose. Who knows? And people are trying to ascertain whether that is true. But it also seems that that there was a medical intervention that has been forced on everybody, and we all know that, and now it seems that it was rather rushed. And there's an element that thinks that perhaps that was done maliciously rather than kindly. The fact that nobody wants to talk about the damage that's as a result of that is very suspect, as we all know. But not only that, but if you go back and look at what these powerful people, the big corporations and the people with lots of money, it seems, you know, why are they putting fluoride, for example, into the water when it's now known, of course, that this is not very useful. It's not good for kids. They might suffer from autism or ADHD or various things like that. Why is it that there is so much reliance on, say, the pesticides and fungicides and herbicides killing the wildlife? That doesn't seem to be actually very beneficial for society, because it's now also in the water. It's depleting the soil. It's killing off the foods. Why is it that we're so hell-bent on this myth of global warming, and then as a result of this myth, and we're not allowed to discuss the other side, by the way, we're all supposed to agree with it because we've been told this rubbish that 97% of scientists supposedly agree, and anybody questioning that is deemed to be thick and stupid. It is, to me, as I sit here thinking about these things and worrying about them, is that it's almost as if over the last 100 years, this secret covenant, if you like, this agreement between certain factions of society, a very small 1% who seem to be the richest and the wealthiest and the most influential, have influenced us and created a situation that is a lot worse for us, rather than actually they could be making it far better by having a more holistic approach, by promoting, instead of lots of chemicals and pharmaceuticals, which when you get your medicine from the doctor, instead of saying actually you could go on a much healthier diet and you could do this and take these herbal remedies and this sort of stuff. No, to take this. And when you open up the piece of paper in the small print, there's billions and billions of side effects. And very often, if you look right at the bottom, of course, and also potentially death. And you think, why would I take a substance that has potentially death? Now, you might say that's just them covering their backs, of course, just in case you die and you can't sue them. Well, you try suing somebody when you're dead. But I just feel that it's almost as if there has been a mastermind behind this. Now, it just so happens that somebody sent me a link to something called The Secret Covenant. And it started to explain that over the generation, these people had been doing deliberately things that would be actually no good for society, such as emphasizing the colour of people's skins and dividing people along that, or putting stuff into the water or into the soil or into the atmosphere, or generating lies that frighten people and then coming up with a solution that might help them but actually is full of poisons. And it was fascinating to read this because my mind was going, as I say, in the same direction. I'll leave a link so you can read about this secret covenant. Now, I can't tell you whether it's true or anything, but it's certainly revealing. But what the thing at the end of that particular list of things they wanted to do was the worry that they could be found out, that this evil mind, this series of families that through a bloodline have generated these terrible ideas to keep us in fear and keep us suggesting that we live in this sort of penal world, which actually is all about debt, about trying to extract money from us, that in that there was a worry that if we, the people, actually came together, changed our mind about being at each other's throats, but joined forces, we would soon see who these people were, and that by our combined joining together and splitting our differences and forgetting our differences and being one, that we could defeat this. And I thought, yes, this does seem like a lot of sense. And part of this journey that I'm clearly on is me thinking about the government. And if they are all puppets and being influenced by people above and suggesting these things that we don't want, well, I don't want to be part of that. So it's almost now as if we actually need to get rid of the whole structure of the government as we see it at the moment. Now, that might be like, bloody hell, that's a step too far, Richard. What are you talking about? We know that it doesn't make any difference who we vote for because we seem to be getting the same. And the parties now are almost just a cigarette paper difference between them. They all seem to be there down to sort of guiding us, herding us into smaller and smaller enclaves and taking away our power and our freedoms and frightening us and continuing to poison our minds with all sorts of rubbish. Well, it seems that that's not what we want. And that's where it comes back to who is above the law? Are they above the law? Because if they are above the law, then yes, they can have a tyrannical government. But if they're not above the law, if we are all, as individual people, if we are all the same, equal in the law, then what gives them the right to govern us the way they do? Because we don't have to consent to it. And if we decide that actually this whole government is wrong and it's structured wrong and it needs to come tumbling down, if we make them completely irrelevant and we laugh at them and we grin and jeer and say, do you know what? You no longer represent us and I no longer consent to it, that we actually start to get together and put our own laws and our own ideas and create a new society. And for our own purposes, not only will we make them irrelevant and find out all those people who've been evil to us and we can deal with them, but we can once again, be happy and not send money for wars or reparations and all that nonsense, that we can concentrate on having a holistic and spiritual approach to life where we love one another, we're friendly with one another, and we help one another. And isn't that what mankind is supposed to be about?